There is a predator in Europe capable of swallowing 40 lethal doses of one of the continent's deadliest venoms and walking away with nothing more than a mild swelling. It doesn't have fangs like a snake, claws like a wolf, or the size to intimidate anything. It weighs about as much as a carton of milk, and somewhere in your garden, right now, while you listen to this, it might be crossing the grass 3 feet from your window, hunting something you'll never even hear die. This is the hedgehog, and by the time this video ends, you will understand why one particular experiment from 1966 made toxicologists rewrite everything they thought they knew about survival, and why, right now, this animal is vanishing from Europe faster than almost anyone has noticed. Stick around, because that story is coming, and it's stranger than fiction. If you're the kind of person who likes finding out the world is weirder than you were told, this channel is exactly where you want to be. So go ahead and hit subscribe before we start, because it only gets stranger from here. Forget everything the picture books taught you. Forget the soft, round, blinking creature that laps milk from a saucer and trembles at loud noises. That image is a costume. Underneath it is one of the oldest, strangest, and most quietly lethal hunters on the continent, and almost nobody knows the real story. Let's start by tearing down the first myth, because it's the one that trips up nearly everyone, including people who study biology for years. A hedgehog is not a rodent. It shares no lineage with mice, squirrels, or rats. Its closest living relative isn't a hamster, it's a mole. Hedgehogs belong to the order of insectivores, the same ancient branch that gave us moles and shrews. And once you know that, everything about the animal starts to make sense. It digs like a mole. It hunts like a mole. Its eyesight is almost useless, and its sense of smell is extraordinary. Exactly what you'd expect from a creature built to operate blind by scent in darkness. The only real difference is that this particular cousin of the mole decided to live above ground and cover itself in weapons. 17 species exist worldwide, spread across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Not a single one is native to the Americas or Australia. This is a purely old world animal. The one we'll focus on today, the species behind almost every fact in this video, is the European hedgehog, Erinaceus europaeus. Now, about those weapons. An adult carries somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 individual quills, the exact count shifting with age, sex, and the individual animal. One mid-20th century British zoologist, driven by nothing but curiosity, sat down and hand-counted the quills on 3 dead hedgehogs. His totals? 5,100, 6,200, and 5,800. Not a job for the faint of heart. Each quill is, structurally, just modified hair, the same keratin that makes up your fingernails, compressed into a hollow, needle-tipped tube roughly an inch long. Scale that up to human proportions, and it's the equivalent of steel rods 1.5 feet long bristling out of your skin. Every quill lives for about 18 months before it drops out and a fresh one grows in its place, meaning the animal is in a constant, slow-motion process of rebuilding its own armor. Over a lifetime, it will replace its entire coat 3 or 4 times. But this is where it stops being simple armor and starts being something closer to engineering. Inside, each quill isn't solid. It's honeycombed with microscopic air chambers, giving it strength without weight. 1 square centimeter of hedgehog skin can resist roughly 2 kilograms of pressure per point of contact. Translate that into consequences. Any predator that tries to crush a curled-up hedgehog gets a mouthful of what amounts to being struck across the gums with nails. Most predators try this exactly once. After that, it's burned into their behavior for life. They simply stop attacking hedgehogs altogether. And here's the part that genuinely stunned me when I found it. Those same quills aren't just a weapon, they're a shock absorber. Zoologists had noticed something odd for years. Hedgehogs occasionally fell from serious heights and simply survived. In 1988, British zoologist Pat Morris decided to actually study it properly, collecting data on hedgehogs that had fallen from roofs, balconies, and trees. His conclusion: a hedgehog can survive a fall of up to 10 meters, roughly a 3rd-story window. Rodents can't take that kind of impact. Cats rarely manage it. A hedgehog curls into a ball, the quills compress and spring back like a built-in cushion, and it lands with barely a scratch. Nature engineered a living crumple zone millions of years before car manufacturers started pouring money into impact absorption research, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. Motorcycle helmet designers in Japan have published research directly inspired by the internal structure of hedgehog quills. Physically, this is not an imposing animal. Body length runs 20 to 30 centimeters, about the size of your open hand, and weight ranges from 0.5 kilogram up to roughly 1.5 kilograms. The largest individuals living on the milder Mediterranean islands where food is abundant, sometimes tipping 2 kilograms. In the harsher north, every gram of fat is hard won. And yes, it has teeth. sharp, white, genuinely fanged teeth, built for a predator, not a grazing animal. The first time you see a macro shot of a hedgehog's open mouth, it looks almost fake, far too serious for a creature usually drawn with fruit balanced on its back. That image, by the way, is pure fiction. It traces back to Pliny the Elder, who claimed in his 1st century natural history that hedgehogs skewered fruit on their spines to carry back to their dens. 2,000 years of observation later, nobody has ever documented this happening in the wild, because hedgehogs barely eat fruit at all. They're predators. But the myth stuck, and artists have been drawing hedgehogs with apples on their backs ever since. Because here's the reveal that upends the whole cute forager image. A hedgehog's diet is meat. Insects, slugs, earthworms, beetles, caterpillars, frogs, mice, bird eggs, chicks, and snakes, which we are absolutely coming back to. One adult hedgehog eats between 150 and 200 insects in a single night. Across a single season, April through October, that adds up to roughly 30,000 beetles, slugs, and garden pests. One animal, no days off. By weight, that's about 5 kilograms of invertebrates consumed in a season. Call it half a bucket of potatoes, except instead of potatoes, it's tens of thousands of small lives ended by one set of jaws. If you have a garden and a resident hedgehog, you don't need slug pellets. You've got a premium biological pest control unit working the night shift for the price of a bowl of water. And that's not even the strangest thing about this animal. Not close. Because a hedgehog, biologically speaking, is a living fossil. The oldest hedgehog fossils date back 15 million years. For scale, the first upright walking humans appeared roughly 2 million years ago. This animal, in essentially its current form, was already walking the earth 13 million years before the first hominid took its first step. Mammoths went extinct about 4,000 years ago. Hedgehogs watched them go, and kept going themselves. The ancient version was actually bigger. Paleontologists working in Germany uncovered fossils of a giant ancestor called Dino-Galerix, roughly 60 centimeters long, the size of a small dog, living 10 million years ago on what was then an island in the ancient Mediterranean, hunting lizards and small birds. When that island eventually merged with the mainland, more efficient predators wiped the giant out. What survived was the small, spiny version, the one currently living in your garden. Researchers at London's Natural History Museum compared modern hedgehogs against their fossil ancestors and found the design has barely changed in 15 million years. Same proportions, same quills, same teeth, just smaller. Evolution looked at this animal a long time ago and decided there was nothing left to improve. In biology, there's a term for that: evolutionary conservatism. The hedgehog is one of its poster animals, sharing that exclusive club with sharks, crocodiles, and cockroaches, which sounds like the cast of a horror movie, but is actually a list of the most successful survivors in the planet's history. And the hedgehog is, without question, the cutest member of that club. Which raises an obvious question. If the design is this good, why isn't Europe overrun with them the way it is with rats? The answer is that hedgehogs are loners through and through. No colonies, no hierarchy, no pack behavior. Each one holds its own territory, roughly 30 hectares for a male, 10 for a female. 30 hectares is about 30 football pitches, patrolled by one animal, alone, every night. When two males cross paths on neutral ground, there's no fight. They simply arc around each other and continue on their separate ways. No aggression, no interaction. Total isolation as a way of life. And they cover ground. A hedgehog travels 3 to 5 kilometers in a single night, on legs a few centimeters long. Scaled to a human stride, that's the equivalent of walking 25 miles every single night, all summer, every summer, for life. When researchers first started fitting hedgehogs with GPS trackers to monitor wild populations, they assumed the devices were malfunctioning. The distances didn't seem possible. They were real. A 2016 German study recorded one individual covering 11 kilometers in a single night. No stops, no rest, just uninterrupted hunting. And they're faster than they look. Top speed hits 9 kilometers per hour, which sounds modest until you remember the leg length involved. Proportionally, that's like a 50-kilogram person sprinting at highway speed. Their hearts back this up. During activity, a hedgehog's heart rate climbs to 250 beats per minute. Compare that to about 160 for a human running flat out. This animal lives permanently in a state we'd consider peak physical exertion. All of that endurance is powered by one dominant sense: smell. A hedgehog's nose outperforms a dog's by a significant margin. German ethologist Bernhard Rensch documented this back in the 1930s, running experiments with bait buried at different depths, and proved that a hedgehog can detect an earthworm through 10 centimeters of soil. Translate that to human terms, and it's like standing on the street and smelling that your third-floor neighbor is frying potatoes. Hearing is just as sharp, a range from 250 up to 45,000 hertz, compared to the human range of roughly 20 to 20,000. That means hedgehogs perceive ultrasonic frequencies we can't even conceptualize. A mouse's squeak, an earthworm shifting underground, a beetle's legs scraping against a blade of grass. A quiet forest at night to a hedgehog isn't quiet at all. It's a concert of thousands of tiny sounds, each one a potential meal. Eyesight, meanwhile, is almost worthless. Nearsighted, poor color perception, and beyond about a meter, the world dissolves into grey blur. It doesn't need vision. It's a creature of night and scent, navigating a map made entirely of smells. Snail over there. Damp earth thick with worms over here. The sharp trace of anxiety left by a passing fox. And somewhere close, unmistakably, a snake. And this is where the story turns genuinely extraordinary, because almost nobody realizes what actually happens when a hedgehog meets a viper. The common European adder is the only venomous snake across most of Europe, Russia included. Its venom is loaded with hemotoxins that break down blood, cause swelling, trigger internal bleeding, and in severe cases, stop the heart outright. An adult human bitten without medical treatment has roughly a 10% chance of dying. A 10-kilogram dog dies in about half of all cases, a cat almost always, and a hedgehog eats one for dinner. Observers noticed this as early as the 1500s. The Swedish naturalist Peter Artedi described villagers in Scandinavia deliberately bringing hedgehogs into their gardens, specifically to hunt snakes. By the 19th century, it was common knowledge. Farmers across Germany, Austria, and northern Russia kept hedgehogs the way others kept cats, except instead of catching mice, theirs caught snakes. Which brings us to the experiment I promised you. In 1966, German toxicologist Wolfgang Buchel ran a series of tests that would make modern ethics boards flinch. But this was a different era of science. Buchel injected hedgehogs with doses of viper venom 40 times higher than what would kill a guinea pig of equal weight. 40 times. The guinea pig died in 3 minutes. The hedgehog developed a small swelling at the injection site and was completely recovered within 2 days. 40 lethal doses, and the hedgehog simply walked it off. Buchel published the numbers, and the paper detonated like a bomb inside the field. Up to that point, hedgehog venom resistance had been dismissed as folk exaggeration. Buchel proved it was cold biochemical fact. And then it got even stranger, for the viper, that is. Buchel identified a specific protein circulating in hedgehog blood, which he named erinacin, after the animal's Latin name. This protein binds directly to venom toxins and neutralizes them before they can damage tissue. This isn't ordinary immunity. It isn't antibodies built up after exposure. It's an inborn biochemical defense, present from birth. A hedgehog could live its entire life without ever encountering a snake and would still be protected. Decades later, in the 1990s, a team of American biochemists at the University of San Diego dug deeper and found that erinacin doesn't just neutralize adder venom, it works against pit viper venom, components of bee venom, and scorpion toxins. It's a broad-spectrum antivenom mechanism carried in the blood from the day the animal is born. Nature built a walking pharmacy, and it did it for free. Sit with that for a second. We've spent decades and untold millions of dollars trying to engineer a universal antivenom serum. A hedgehog has been carrying one built in at no cost this entire time, and pharmaceutical researchers have taken notice. In 2020, a team of Italian researchers published a paper in the journal Toxicon exploring how to synthesize a laboratory analog of erinacin. If they succeed, it could reshape snakebite treatment worldwide. Meanwhile, nature solved this problem roughly 13 million years ago and has been quietly carrying the answer around on the back of a small, spiny animal ever since. Picture the actual hunt. The hedgehog catches the snake's scent and closes in. The adder rears into a defensive coil, hissing, ready to strike. The hedgehog feints an attack, then curls immediately into a ball. The snake bites and hits solid quills. Useless. No venom reaches blood. It strikes again. Same result, while the hedgehog inches steadily closer with every exchange. Eventually, the snake tires, its movement slowing, and the hedgehog uncurls in a single sharp motion and clamps down on its head. Its jaw is built to sever a snake's spine just just behind the skull in one bite. Fight over. The whole process usually runs 15 to 40 minutes, and the hedgehog is in no hurry. It knows that even an unlucky bite barely matters to a body that's already immune. Time is on its side. The snake has none. Then it eats the entire animal, bones included, a process that takes another 20 minutes, starting at the head and working steadily toward the tail, with 36 grinding teeth. Half a meter of adder reduces to bare ground, and one satisfied hedgehog. Other predators try this too, but none of them pull it off cleanly. A fox can kill a viper, but often dies from the bite in the process. For the hedgehog, that risk simply doesn't exist. In southern Europe, the same animal takes on saw-scaled vipers and other species with venom even more potent than the common adders, and wins every time. I'll admit it freely, I spent years picturing hedgehogs as sleepy little milk drinkers gazing at the moon. They turned out to be professional snake assassins, carrying a built-in antivenom that pharmaceutical companies are still trying to reverse engineer. Since we're on the subject of food, let's clear up the rest of the myths, because almost everything commonly believed about a hedgehog's diet is wrong. Myth 1. Milk. Never, under any circumstances, give a hedgehog milk. Cow's milk is effectively poison to them. They lack the lactase enzyme needed to break down milk sugar, and it triggers severe diarrhea, dehydration, and frequently death. Every well-meaning gardener who sets out a saucer of milk is, without realizing it, killing the animal slowly and painfully. A hedgehog that drinks milk can die within 2 or 3 days. And the cruelest part is the delay. The gardener sees it drink and wander off, feels good about helping nature, and a day later finds it collapse somewhere in the grass, with its digestive system shutting down. If you want to actually help a hedgehog, put out plain water. That's genuinely all it needs from you. Maybe a small bowl of plain cat food. No gravy if you want to go further. Never milk. Myth 2. Apples and mushrooms. Hedgehogs occasionally eat fallen fruit, but it's rare and opportunistic, not a real food source. Their digestive system isn't built for plant matter. Roughly 90% of what a hedgehog eats across its life is animal protein: insects, mollusks, worms, small vertebrates. A hedgehog eating an apple is roughly equivalent to you chewing on cardboard out of desperation. Technically possible, nutritionally pointless. So what does it actually eat? British biologists analysed the stomach contents of wild hedgehogs in a 2014 study and produced an honest breakdown. Beetles and their larvae top the list, especially cockchafers, dung beetles, and ground beetles. Earthworms come second, up to 100 in a single night, adding up to roughly 200 grams of worms alone, nearly half the animal's own body weight. Imagine a human eating 60 pounds of meat in one sitting. Slugs and snails come third, shell and all. After that, caterpillars, millipedes, spiders, frogs, small lizards, mice, shrews, ground-nesting bird eggs, and of course, snakes. There's an old British saying, if a hedgehog lives in your garden, you won't have slugs. Not fewer slugs, none. One hedgehog can clear a full hectare of garden almost entirely of slugs in a season, which is why UK conservation groups now actively encourage hedgehogs as free, effective pest control, promoting hedgehog highways, small gaps cut into garden fences so the animals can move freely between properties. The movement caught on so widely that Britain now has an informal standard size for these gaps, 13 by 13 centimetres, exactly enough for an adult hedgehog to pass through. Its stomach matches the ambition of its diet. Hedgehogs can digest chitin, the hard exoskeleton of insects. Try biting into a beetle sometime. It's like biting a fragment of plastic. A hedgehog chews and digests it without issue. Its gut even hosts specialized bacteria that neutralize toxins in certain prey. It happily eats blister beetles loaded with cantharidin, a toxin lethal to most animals, and simply shrugs it off, the same way it shrugs off snake venom and bee venom. This animal is, functionally, a walking detox lab for anything nature labels poisonous. It can even raid beehives, walking straight up, pushing its snout in, and eating live, stinging bees one after another while getting stung repeatedly in the face and paws. It keeps eating regardless. Erinacin dulls the pain of bee venom too. It's not pleasant, the hedgehog's face swells and it walks around uncomfortable for a few days afterward, but it survives. Beekeepers, understandably, are less charmed. A single raid can cost a healthy hive up to 1,000 bees in one night. Now for one of the strangest, least explained behaviors in the entire animal kingdom. Hedgehogs perform something called self-anointing, and there is still no confirmed explanation for why. It works like this. A hedgehog encounters a new, strongly scented object: toad skin, a rotting apple, a cigarette butt, a bar of soap, the shed skin of a venomous snake, anything with an intense smell, and starts chewing on it. This produces a thick, frothy saliva. Then comes the ritual itself. The hedgehog twists into an almost acrobatic pose and begins smearing that foam across its own quills, back and sides, sometimes continuing for up to an hour, until its entire body is coated in the scent of whatever it found. Nobody fully knows why. There are three leading theories: scent camouflage against predators, protection against parasites like fleas and ticks, or, the most striking possibility, that the hedgehog is chemically loading its own quills into an even more dangerous weapon. Biologists have documented cases of hedgehogs anointing themselves with foam chewed from toad skin, which contains bufotoxin, a potent neurotoxin. And afterward, a puncture from those quills produced a real reaction even in humans. British zoologist Nigel Reeve documented a case in 1990 of a hedgehog found coated in foam smelling of engine oil, apparently sourced from an old rag in a garage. The strangest recorded case involved a hedgehog that patiently chewed a piece of discarded chewing gum until it produced enough foam, then smeared it over its entire body, emerging looking like a small spiky pink ball. And here's the part that makes it stranger still. Hedgehogs do this even with no danger present at all, simply out of curiosity when they encounter a new smell. Captive raised hedgehogs perform the exact same ritual with objects as mundane as shaving cream or perfume. It's innate, unlearned, and unexplained, and it starts astonishingly early. Hedgehog pups begin self-anointing at around 3 weeks old, before they've even properly left the nest. A newborn whose eyes have barely opened will independently seek out the right object and perform a ritual its ancestors were performing 15 million years ago. Nobody teaches it. It's simply already inside them. But not even this compares to what happens every winter, because what a hedgehog does to survive the cold isn't sleep. By any medical standard, it's clinical death followed by resurrection, and I'm not exaggerating for effect. When temperatures drop below roughly 10 degrees, usually late October or early November, a hedgehog enters hibernation. And hibernation here means something far more radical than a long nap. Body temperature collapses from a normal 34 degrees down to just 1 or 2 degrees above freezing. A heart that beats up to 250 times a minute during activity slows to around 10. Breathing drops to a single breath per minute. Metabolism falls by 98%. If a human entered this state, a doctor with a stethoscope would call the time of death. Cold body, no heartbeat, no breath. But the hedgehog isn't dead, it's simply running on minimum power, and it stays there for 5 to 6 months. The den it builds for this, usually dug in October, is a genuine feat of engineering, up to half a meter deep, with an inner chamber the size of a shoebox, lined meticulously with dry leaves, grass, and moss. The insulation is so effective that the internal temperature holds around 5 degrees above freezing, even when it's -20 outside. This isn't just the burrow, it's a thermos the animal builds for itself. Surviving that state runs entirely on stored fat. By early autumn, a hedgehog needs to weigh at least 600 grams, ideally closer to a full kilogram, or it won't make it through winter. That fat comes in 2 layers, ordinary white fat and a special brown fat unique to hibernating mammals. Brown fat is essentially a biological furnace. When it's time to wake up, brown fat begins burning rapidly and reheats the body from the inside. In roughly 2 hours, a hedgehog raises its core temperature from near zero all the way back to 34 degrees. Picture that scale. It's the equivalent of a corpse becoming a living, walking person within 2 hours. Researchers at Sweden's Uppsala University studied the biochemistry of this waking process in 2010 and found that the hedgehog's body genuinely erupts into biochemical chaos during the transition. Free radical levels spike dramatically, the kind of surge that would cause catastrophic cell damage in almost any other mammal. In a hedgehog it doesn't, because it carries specialized enzymes that neutralize that oxidative stress. It's one reason hedgehogs that survive their first winter tend to live comparatively long lives afterward. Their cellular defenses are built for exactly this kind of overload. They wake only occasionally through the winter, roughly every 2 to 3 weeks, shift position, relieve themselves, and drop straight back under. If a warm winter causes too frequent waking, a hedgehog can simply run out of energy before spring. According to Swedish researchers, a single wake-up cycle burns as much fat as an entire week of active summer life, which is why, counterintuitively, mild winters are more dangerous to hedgehogs than harsh ones. As European winters trend warmer with climate change, it's become another quiet driver behind their decline. They're waking up too often and running out of fuel. And right before all of this, in September and October, hedgehogs feed with total abandon, sometimes gaining up to 30% of their body weight in weeks. An animal weighing 600 grams in summer might hit 900 by October, visibly swollen with stored fat. That same reckless autumn feeding is exactly when road deaths spike threefold. Hedgehogs cross roads with their guard down, entirely focused on one task: eat, 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 right before the cold arrives. Now, for something you almost certainly didn't expect: hedgehog sex, which manages to be both comedy and tragedy at once. The breeding season across Europe runs April through August, and once a male locates a female by scent, what follows is something biologists genuinely call the hedgehog carousel. The male circles the female, sometimes for hours, literally hours, while she rotates to keep her spines facing him, sniffing, snorting, deciding. This strange courtship dance can run anywhere from 2 to 5 hours. One documented case had a male circling a single female for 7 straight hours without eating or resting, simply circling and hoping. Why does it take so long? Because the female needs to be completely certain she's ready, and because the mechanics of the act itself are a genuine engineering problem. Try to picture it. 2 spine-covered spheres need to connect without either one getting hurt. Evolution's solution is elegant. The female flattens her quills against her body, making her back nearly smooth, while the male's anatomy is positioned close to the belly, avoiding her spines entirely. The act itself is brief, around 10 minutes, and afterward the male simply leaves. No lingering, no shared walk home. Job done, and he's gone. In all likelihood, he will never see that female again. A single male can father offspring with 5 to 7 females in one season, and females aren't monogamous either. Genetic testing of hedgehog litters has found that a single litter of 5 pups can have 3 different fathers. Multiple paternity is real in this species. The female is deliberately promiscuous, maximizing genetic diversity for her offspring, which is, evolutionarily, exactly the right move. More fathers means better odds that at least some of her young are suited to whatever conditions come next. Pregnancy runs about 35 days, and this is where things get genuinely bizarre. Hedgehogs are capable of what's called delayed implantation. If conditions are poor, food scarce, weather bad, danger present, a fertilized egg can simply pause before attaching to the uterine wall, waiting, sometimes for weeks, until conditions improve before development begins. Nature built in pregnancy scheduling. It sounds almost too strange to be real. I had to double check that one across multiple sources, but it's confirmed. Litters typically run 4 to 7 pups, born blind, hairless, pink, weighing about 20 grams each, roughly the weight of 2 large coins. But astonishingly, the quills are already there, formed under the skin before birth, simply soft and flattened at delivery so they don't injure the mother. Within hours, they begin hardening and standing up. By the next day, a newborn already has around 100 soft white spines. Within 2 to 3 weeks, the pups look like miniature, paler versions of the adults, gaining full adult coloring by around 2 months. The mother nurses for roughly 6 weeks, after which the pups begin leaving the nest to learn hunting on their own. By 3 months, they're fully independent, and by 8 months, they can become parents themselves. Hedgehog childhood is short and intense, no extended learning period, straight into the fight for survival. During those 6 weeks in the nest, the mother rarely strays far, and everything she manages to hunt on brief nightly trips goes straight into milk production. She can lose up to 40% of her body weight nursing. She quite literally exhausts herself for her offspring, and if food runs short, she suffers before the pups do. And here's a fact that genuinely unsettles me. If a mother senses danger in the days right after birth, she may kill and eat her own pups. The logic, while brutal, is coldly efficient. If a predator has found the nest, the pups are already doomed. She can't carry them. There are too many, and they're far too small to flee. So she reclaims the resources instead. Cannibalism as a final act of motherhood. She then abandons the nest, recovers, and tries again the following season. Nature doesn't do sentiment, it does survival math. There's a darker behavior too. A male hedgehog that stumbles onto a nest of pups that aren't his own may sometimes kill them, a strategy that pushes the female back into reproductive readiness sooner. Lions do the same thing. It's rarer and less documented in hedgehogs, but it's real. Nature isn't built around our ethics, it's built around the efficient transmission of genes. Everything that gets in the way disappears, everything that helps persists. Every living thing on this planet is the product of millions of years of ruthless filtering, and the hedgehog is no exception. Now, let's talk about how deeply this animal is woven into human history, because the connection runs far deeper than most people realize. Humans and hedgehogs have shared the landscape across Europe and Asia for tens of thousands of years. Hedgehog bones turn up in Paleolithic cave sites. Early humans ate them. In ancient Egypt, hedgehogs appeared on amulets, treated as symbols of rebirth because they seemed to return from the dead each spring. After their apparent winter death, Egyptians buried hedgehog figurines with the deceased, hoping the person would rise again the way the animal did. The British Museum holds examples of these figurines that are more than 3,000 years old. In ancient Rome, hedgehogs were sold in markets. Their spiny hide was harvested to make wool combing brushes, an entire industry built around it. By the 5th century, the trade had thinned wild populations near Rome so badly that Emperor Valentinian I issued a formal decree protecting hedgehogs across the empire. Arguably, the first wildlife protection law in recorded history aimed squarely at this one small animal. In Britain, right up through the 19th century, hedgehogs were treated almost as agricultural livestock, deliberately encouraged to control insect pests in fields. And in some regions, a bounty was paid per head, driven by the mistaken belief that hedgehogs snuck into pastures at night and suckled milk directly from cows. This is physically impossible. A hedgehog's mouth is far too small, and no cow would tolerate the approach. But the myth held on so stubbornly that over roughly 2 centuries, official records show around 500,000 hedgehogs killed in England alone for that bounty. 500,000 lives lost to a rumour. They were eaten too, particularly among Romani communities in Britain, where a traditional dish involved wrapping a whole hedgehog, spines and all, in clay and roasting it over a fire. After an hour, the hardened clay would crack away, pulling the quills off with it and leaving clean meat behind, said to taste something like pork. I won't be testing that claim personally, but it's part of the record. In parts of Eastern Europe, hedgehogs were still eaten as recently as the 20th century, during the hardship years of wartime famine. Older generations remember it. Nobody eats hedgehog today. Instead, they're being killed en masse by an entirely different method: cars. British ecologists estimate that between 150,000 and 300,000 hedgehogs die under vehicle wheels every single year in the UK alone. Across continental Europe, estimates run past 1 million. Every time you drive a country road at night, remember, somewhere in the grass beside you, a hedgehog is heading toward the warm asphalt to rest after a night of hunting. Its instinct, evolved over millions of years, is to curl into a ball at the first sign of danger, a defense that worked flawlessly against foxes, dogs, and wolves for millennia. It does nothing against a car traveling 70 kilometers an hour. A curled hedgehog just becomes a neat, spiny obstacle under a tire. Evolution never prepared it for that kind of speed. No animal was. We built the conditions in which an ancient survival mechanism now works against the very creature it evolved to protect. Then there's the chemical threat. Garden pesticides, particularly slug pellets, poison the slugs a hedgehog eats, and the hedgehog dies from secondary poisoning after finishing the meal. If you garden with metaldehyde, the most common slug poison, you are, without intending to, effectively killing hedgehogs. The European Union banned free retail sale of metaldehyde in 2020 for exactly this reason. In Russia, it remains legal. Then there's habitat loss. Hedgehogs need hedgerows, overgrown field edges, brush, compost heaps, the kind of messy landscape that modern agriculture and modern gardening have been systematically erasing in favour of manicured lawns and bare concrete boundaries. In that kind of landscape, there's simply nowhere for a hedgehog to live. Every perfectly trimmed lawn stretching fence to fence is, quietly, a space this animal has been shut out of. And there's a fourth, less obvious threat: spring grass fires. Gardeners in many regions burn off last year's dry grass in spring, grass that's frequently sheltering hedgehogs freshly emerged from hibernation. They can't outrun the flames. Russian ecologists estimate these spring burns kill tens of thousands of hedgehogs every year, and almost nobody notices because the animals simply burn along with the grass and vanish into the ash. Put it all together, and over the past 20 years, the European hedgehog population has fallen by roughly 70%, according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature. 70%. Out of every 10 hedgehogs alive in Europe at the start of the millennium, only 3 remain today. In 2020, the species was officially reclassified as near threatened, a status that could easily shift to endangered within the next few years. And they're disappearing quietly. No headlines, no protests, no viral campaigns. Just fewer, one by one. They're not majestic like a tiger, not celebrated for intelligence like a dolphin, not exotic like a panda. They're small, spiny, nocturnal, and almost nobody has actually seen one closely. A silent collapse happening in the grass, right past your fence. Before we get to how this all resolves, a handful of facts didn't fit neatly anywhere else, but each one is its own small revelation. Hedgehogs, it turns out, have regional accents. Biologist Amelie Schiefer studied German populations in 2016 and found that hedgehogs from different parts of Europe produce slightly different vocalizations, snorts, squeaks, grunts, all present across the species, but with frequency patterns that shift by region. Eastern European hedgehogs sound subtly different from Western ones. Regional dialects in a solitary nocturnal animal likely carrying no real meaning, just a byproduct of genetically isolated populations, but a delightful fact regardless. They also swim, which surprised me. Short legs, a heavy body, and quills that seem built to soak up water. Yet hedgehogs paddle across small ponds and streams without much trouble. Trapped air between the quills keeps them mostly buoyant, essentially turning the animal into a living float, though they only swim when they have to. What they can't do is climb out of a steep-sided pool, and thousands of hedgehogs drown every year in ornamental garden ponds across Britain after falling in. Which is why conservation groups now push for ramps or floating bits of bark in garden ponds, so a fallen hedgehog has a way out. Their eyes, despite the near blindness, can detect ultraviolet light, meaning in darkness that looks pitch black to us, a hedgehog's world glows faintly. Rodent urine, animal tracks, droppings, all leaving a faint UV trace it can follow like a lit path toward prey. Their gut can also handle death cap mushrooms, which contain amatoxin, a toxin that destroys the liver in essentially every mammal, except somehow this one. Nobody fully knows why. It's another entry on the long list of unexplained hedgehog biochemistry. Genetically, their nearest cousins besides moles are bats, both descended from the same ancient insectivore branch before splitting apart roughly 70 million years ago. One lineage taking to the air, the other staying underground. Distant cousins who ended up in wildly different professions. In Japan, a different species entirely, the African pygmy hedgehog, is kept as a household pet, with dedicated cafes in Tokyo where people pay to sip tea and handle them. An entire tourism industry built around a captive relative, while its wild European cousin quietly disappears back home. Albino hedgehogs exist too, white spines, pink eyes, occurring in roughly 1 in 10,000 births. They rarely survive in the wild, far too visible to predators, but thrive in captivity and command prices up to $1,000 among breeders. They have their own species of flea, one that lives exclusively on hedgehogs and can't survive on human, dog, or cat skin chemistry, so there's no need to fear catching fleas from one. And they snore, loudly. Wildlife rehabilitators who house hedgehogs in recovery centers report full nightly concerts too loud to sleep through. Recordings of hedgehogs snoring are all over the internet if you want to laugh. And culturally, in Russian tradition, the hedgehog holds an outsized place. Folktales, fables, animation. Hedgehog in the Fog, the 1975 animated short, remains one of the most acclaimed pieces of animation in film history, voted the greatest animated film of all time at a Tokyo festival in 2003. We know almost nothing about the real animal, and yet its image in our culture runs deep. Small, vulnerable, walking through fog towards something unknown. If you think about it, that's us. So why does any of this matter? Why spend this much time on a small spiny animal most of you have never actually seen up close? Because a hedgehog isn't just an animal, it's an indicator, a living sensor for how healthy the ground beneath your feet actually is. Where hedgehogs live, insects thrive. Where insects thrive, the soil is clean and biodiversity is intact. Where hedgehogs vanish, quieter, less visible species vanish right behind them. This animal is often the first visible signal that an ecosystem is starting to unravel. Losing it isn't the loss of one species, it's the loss of an entire chain holding a small piece of nature in balance. The Greek poet Archilochus wrote in the 7th century BC a line that the philosopher Isaiah Berlin later built an entire essay around in the 20th century. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. Foxes know many tricks. The hedgehog knows one, but it's real, fundamental. How to survive. How to defend yourself. How to persist for 15 million years while barely changing at all. It knows something we don't. How to be part of the earth, not separate from it, but inside it. We've spent the last century working hard to disconnect ourselves from that, paving over fields, walling ourselves behind fences, convincing ourselves we live apart in some comfortable world of our own making. But the earth keeps running on its own rules, and the hedgehog crossing your garden path on a summer night is a quiet reminder of that. It was here millions of years before you. With any luck, it'll still be here millions of years after we're gone. And if we're not lucky, it will simply leave, quietly, without ceremony, the way everything leaves that we fail to value in time. I keep coming back to one image. A summer night 100 years from now. Same stars, same grass, same crickets, except the grass is empty. And somewhere, someone reads in an old book that a small, spiny creature once lived in Europe, one that could kill vipers and sleep an entire winter without breathing, and assumes it must be a fairy tale, something too strange to have been real. I don't want that picture to become true. It still can become true. Which is why, if there's one thing to take from this, it's this. Leave one small, deliberately messy corner of your garden alone. A pile of branches, some leaf litter, a bit of overgrowth. That's already something. That's a hedgehog home. Maybe one hedgehog moves in, survives the winter there, and gives birth to a litter in spring. Maybe one of those pups survives its own first winter, and the chain simply continues, which means nothing ends. The hedgehog isn't a cute character from a children's cartoon. It's an ancient warrior, a near-perfect hunter, a living paradox, a walking pharmacy wearing armor. It eats snakes and survives falls from third-story windows. It's a witness to the planet's history, an animal that watched mammoths disappear and is now watching us. And if you're ever out at night, in a garden or a park, and you hear a quiet snuffling in the grass and catch a small, spiny silhouette moving through the dusk, stop for a second. Don't touch it, don't rush to photograph it, just watch and let it pass. That's not just an animal, that's a fragment of an ancient world that has, somehow, survived all the way to your feet. And the next time someone calls a hedgehog dumb, helpless, or funny, remember, this is a creature unafraid of the deadliest venom in Europe, one that can die every winter and rise again every spring, older than anything humanity has ever built. It isn't funny. It might be the most underrated animal on this continent, maybe on the entire planet. If this gave you a completely different picture of an animal you thought you already knew, let me know in the comments. And if you're curious what other ordinary creature is hiding an equally wild secret, there's another video waiting for you right after this one that I think you'll want to see next.